to experience pain. The problem I have with that is that if they're experiencing detailed auditory phenomena, that means their auditory cortex and the auditory association cortex and the thalamus have to be receiving sufficient blood so that they've got enough electricity for these to work. And what the other side's explanation often is that, well, they're overhearing these things and they're creating a movie, they're creating a hallucination based on what they're hearing. But if that part of their brain is working, then why isn't the frontal lobe working well enough to experience pain? That's my position.
Can you respond to that?
Well, there are two things we're talking about here. As I said, the affective response to their whole experience is different from actual perception of pain at the time of the experience. They are two different things. So what I am saying is that when somebody tells me that, yeah, I had my chest open and I had this experience and I did not feel the pain, well, there are two explanations possibly for that. One of them is when they have the so-called hypoxia or not enough oxygen, many parts of the brain are in different situations of oxygen availability. So as he mentioned, there's a part of the brain called thalamus. That's the one that's responsible for, it's kind of the gatekeeper, the initial gatekeeper of all the pain stimuli that come to our brain. And from there, they go to the what's called cerebral cortex, where we are consciously aware of, well, I'm feeling the pain, and what do I do about it? So when the near-death experience, we don't know the combination of to what extent the frontal lobe is working, what extent the thalamus is working. So this absolutely need to be taken into consideration when somebody claims something.
Thank you, Dr. Palavalli. Okay, let's move to the next question. What is the location of the place where souls go after death?
Imagine, if you will, a two-dimensional universe where all the people are like people drawn on a piece of paper. They exist in two dimensions, but they can hear you. You can speak to them. They can't see you. You exist in three-dimensional space. In their world, there's only an x-axis and a y-axis. I'm sorry, x and a y. You have a z. So in order to interact with them, you stick your finger in their plane, and all they see is a circle, the circle of your finger, and they think that's you. Okay? They can't see you because you exist in a higher dimension. We assume that, or the question assumes rather, that souls go to Kansas City at a particular zip code or something like that, and they exist in this space-time continuum. Based on people's experiences, very often people will describe seeing in 360 degrees or taking a look at their whole life. In just a short period, they've observed themselves all the way from the time they were born until they've crossed over. That is a very, very common description. We don't know for sure what exactly is going on. Consciousness is very strange like that, but I would say that it's not about where they are. When these people very often think, let's say they're on the other side, they're with those family members, it's not uncommon for them to think of a family member like a sister or a brother or a child or parent. And as soon as they think of that person, they're with them. No spatial, they don't have to transverse any space. They're just there. It's that quick. It kind of reminds you of entangled particles. You know, and that's something that in quantum mechanics that we understand to be very real, that in entangled particles, they communicate with one another over space independent of how far they are away from one another. We don't know if anything like that is going on, but we know that's a part of our physical universe. The question is, where are they? I doubt that they are within this particular three-dimensional space. Now, as far as what they're experiencing, we have hundreds and hundreds, if not, well, literally thousands of accounts. I would recommend, if the viewer's really interested, go to NDERF.org. That's the Near-Death Foundation Research, Near-Death Research Foundation, and you'll read about 3,000 case histories. And here's a common one, for example, Michael, and he described some of his experiences. I was taken into a very narrow door, and the person with me told me to open the door and go in. That was the last time I saw or heard this individual. I entered through the door and immediately felt an intense feeling of love and warmth. As I walked, I saw a beautiful field with an intense blue sky. And then he goes on to describe the grass and the rocks and the trees and the singing that he heard and the multicolored light that was coming at him. These are very detailed pictures, but they're very, very similar. You could say that people conjure this up from their memories, and it's like a dream. But in dreams, people don't normally say that the visual and auditory and tactile experiences were significantly more real than what they experience in everyday life. And that is one of the reasons why these people hang on to these experiences for life.
One of my friends by name Jim Hong and I, we were having a discussion. And there was a saying that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence before we can accept them as realities. So when somebody gives some explanation of their experience of what they have seen, he just mentioned grass, blue sky, and whatever. That's a memory of in this world. To our knowledge, in the universe we have seen whatever we have seen. To our knowledge, there's no other planet like Earth. Now, are they just talking about memories of what they had on this place? That is more likely to me than a place that's somewhere in the universe. Now, the most important thing is, again, as I said, the significance given by the person to their experience is what we're talking about. And that person may say, I went to this place that was the more beautiful than I have seen. It's an adjective, but it doesn't mean anything to me as far as verification of what that place is and where it is. What we are talking about, claims being taken as evidence. No, the claims at the most, until they are verified repetitively and consistently, are called either assumptions or hypotheses. But they can be evidence for the existence of it. That's why people, as I said, from India talk about gods from India. People from Spain who are into Catholicism talk about Jesus Christ and Catholic idea of heaven. Why? Because that's the memory and cultural upbringing they have. So all these phenomena that they experience, they tend to brush them or paint them with their own idea of what heaven should be, or what heaven was told was going to be, and what they feel heaven should be and wish to be. So the most important point is, when you have faith, which is different than science, you can assume anything to exist anywhere the way you want. For example, Harry Potter, we know exists in the minds of so many children, but we know that he doesn't exist. He exists as an imagination. So heaven and hell can exist as an imagination depending upon what the people wish.
He summed up his position very well. He says extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And I would say that, well, at some point, you got to figure out how much evidence do you actually need. Now, in some of the later questions, I present a lot more of it, but the evidence that support their, we haven't gotten to that yet, the evidence that supports their valid, and the evidences that I'll be talking about are, things like extracorporeal awareness, the fact that when you survey these individuals, that 99% of the people, of the entities that they see, are dead people. It doesn't matter whether it's a young person, an old person, a middle-aged person, a very young person, the same percentage of dead people are seen. Now, old people, you would expect that most of their friends are dead, most of their family are dead. So there's going to be a very high percentage of dead people that they see. But young people, why is it that children, when they cross over, report seeing siblings? Some siblings were aborted or were premature and didn't survive. Grandparents and dead parents, those are the sorts of people that young children report seeing. Not their school teachers, not their parents, not living people. Now, I don't believe every near-death experience that is reported. Some people do have delirium. Okay? Some people may decide to make something up. We can't accept them all. But it's the sheer number of cases that we have where people describe things, especially things that are outside of their bodies, accurately, that provide evidence that these are real experiences. So I'd say that there are many lines. We'll talk about them as we go forth, but this is not without any evidence. But not the kind. This is not something that you can go to that side and take samples and bring back and say, well, here's some of the grass that I found. Well, here's some of the rocks. And as I said, another piece of evidence that we didn't get to was, what about people who are born deaf or blind? Very often when they come back, and these have been reported, and I have the references, when they come back, they describe things that they saw and heard, and they're accurate. Okay? These are if this were a dream or hallucination, how do you hallucinate or dream senses that you've never been born with, that you've never had before? These are all evidence that these are very real experiences.
Dr. Palavalli.
What he's talking about is what people reported. That's the most important word to me.
Every
No, I
literature
understand.
that we read is something somebody wrote. If you applied that rationale, you would never make it through chapter 1 of any scientific textbook because you are dependent on the author's word. The author quotes references. You'd have to go through and look up every reference and then go to this head investigator and ask them, how did you do that experiment? How do I know that you didn't cheat? You were getting grant money, weren't you? That's secondary gain. How do I know you didn't lie? If you don't want to believe it, you can always keep picking at it to the point where it becomes absurd.
Natural explanation must be eliminated before you give a supernatural explanation. Simple. That is the simple, basic principle of science is, can we explain this experience through natural phenomena? Then you go to the next step when you cannot, right? So what I am saying is in 21st century, many of these experiences are now being explained by natural biological phenomena, first thing. The second thing is, when you come to a point where you can't explain it, you don't conjure up some entity that you cannot verify. That's called imagination. So you tell them, I don't know the answer, I'm going to wait till we have either the ability to understand it or we have the mechanism to verify it.
And you can, if you decide, I mean, he's got his a priori thesis is that any claim of the supernatural is automatically wrong. I mean, you've got to go through every possible explanation naturally before you can accept that. The thing is, what you're doing is you're calling all these people idiots or liars, these doctors, lawyers, judges, all these people who are having these experiences, regardless of their educational background. When they have these experiences, they're automatically wrong because they're presuming it was something supernatural. They're presuming that these experiences were real because of the way it made them feel. Even in cases where they pop out of their bodies, their perception is they pop out of their bodies, and then they witness, let's say they witness a doctor and a relative talking in the cafeteria, which has occurred, and they're able to quote the conversations word for word. His side has never explained how that happens. It's like, well, how do you know they didn't talk to each other? How do you know this is not a conspiracy? How do you know they didn't get together on a lie? I have patients personally who have done this where I've interviewed the patient and the person who was seen. And because I want a person who knew them, especially the patient, I'm going, this is not somebody who typically lies to me for no reason. Okay, so unless there's a conspiracy and us doctors are just foolishly believing these patients who are pulling the wool over our eyes in some kind of ridiculous conspiracy, unless that is happening, these things, why would they lie? These things are real. They are really observing events and circumstances outside of their bodies.
Can you specifically respond to his
Yes.
statement?
But before I respond to that, I want to respectfully request you not to put words in my mouth.
Okay. What word did I put in your
I
mouth?
never said these people are stupid or idiots. I never said it.
No,
listen
do you know
to me,
how condescending
please.
that is
No,
to
no,
say,
no, no, please listen to me.
okay,
Please listen
all right,
to me.
all right.
Time and again during our discussion, I mentioned that the experiences are real. I told you time and again the experiences are real.
Oh, I'm not disputing
Yes.
that. I'm not disputing
So I never
that.
said their experiences that they're reporting are because they're stupid or idiot. No, I just said, now you have an experience. I have not called it anything yet.
We do have patients, for example, it's not unusual for cardiac patients to have EEG monitoring to look for signs of cerebral ischemia. Now, these individuals are flatlined. The EEG is isoelectric. And during that time, they pop out, or they report that they pop out later. And they're able to describe conversations in the operating room that were occurring at the time of their surgery. They are, not only that, it's not unusual, and well, it is more unusual, but it does occur, where they're able to describe events and conversations occurring outside of that arena, sometimes in the cafeteria, sometimes miles away. Now, you say, let's take a look at all the possible natural explanations. Well, naturally, there could be a conspiracy between the patient and the people that were having the conversation, the doctors, the nurses, and so forth. It could be that this person was hearing, even though the EEG was isoelectric, it could be that they were still able to hear, even though the temporal lobe didn't register any electricity. Okay? That's a possible. We don't, is that possible? And they made it up. That's conceivable. That would be a new thing. If that's true, that's a new deal where there are no auditory evoked potentials, and yet the person is perceiving language. That would be a new thing. Because even when people hear voices and have auditory hallucinations, there is activity in the temporal lobe. Okay?